I'm here to introduce you to the California Civic Data Coalition. My name is Ben Welsh. I'm a data journalist from the LA Times, which basically means I'm a computer nerd who works in the newsroom writing code, trying to take big piles of data and turn them into news, taking numbers and using them to tell stories, right? And here's a story that's given me a lot of trouble right now. I think as everybody here in this room knows, right, Washington, D.C. and the race for the White House is being flooded by millions of dollars of campaign contributions, much of it sort of secret, to try to influence who our next president will be. And citizens and voters are really struggling to keep up with everything that's going on with that. But the problem is almost in some ways bigger at the 50 state capitals spread across America, because with declining newsrooms and shrinking resources, there's just fewer people even paying attention to these lower level campaigns. And nowhere is that problem really more acute than in Sacramento, which is the capital of California, America's most populous state. There, millions of dollars routinely flood even the smallest state house races, and much, much more will pour in on our high-stakes ballot measures, yes or no questions, where voters are asked to decide hot-button issues like gay marriage or genetically modified foods. And in those big piles of money, you'll find people like this man, Charles Munger, who is the top donor to our state's GOP, and this man, Scott Wetch, who's a super lobbyist for the unions that back California's Democratic Party. And no one really knows what they're up to or can keep track of it because the data's just not in place to make it happen. If you wanted to try, you could go to this. An antique and, to be honest, awful website operated by the state of California known as Cal Access. It allows you to kind of hunt and peck to try to figure out what's going on, and it doesn't do a very good job of it. We thought things might get better a couple years ago when the Secretary of State was pressured to release the 35 million records that are in that database behind that website so that people could try to do more with it and dig through it and find stuff. But there was one problem. We were wrong. When we looked inside of it, it was a mess, right? I almost cannot overstate this. It's like a disaster of monumental proportions in terms of information management. It's like so freakish and ugly, it like deserves its own new season of Hoarders on A&E, right? And so that's where the California Civic Data Coalition comes in. We're a team of data journalists from competing newsrooms across the state who are now working with experts at Stanford to try to solve this common problem and tame this database. Our open source software will perfect the many filters, joins, transformations, and other boring data work necessary to turn that big nasty database into easy to find and download and understand bulk data files that analysts, academics, political scientists, journalists, activists, whoever wants to, can easily get a hold of and try to do much more ambitious analysis than those point-and-click websites let you do. And, an example of something like that might be this, which is a graphic that came out of a story done by one of my colleagues, Paige St. John, last year. It maps out the incredibly complex network of funders, wealthy individuals, pressure groups, and others who helped push through a ballot measure that lessened sentencing penalties in California that was a pretty big deal. Now, to do this kind of story and do all this work, it took Paige literally weeks, right, of digging through this data to kind of make it all happen and learn it all. And then all that expertise she gathered along the way just went into her dresser, into her drawer of her desk and isn't really shared with anyone else. And our hope is that by making this data easier to get at and understand and work with, something like this can be done by a much broader set of people and much, much, much more quickly, in hours or days instead of weeks or months, right? Another example might be the story of this man, former California Assembly Speaker Fabian Nunez, who had a secret. He was using his campaign contributions to fund lavish travel to Paris and Italy and buy gifts for his friends and colleagues. And that was a scandal that sat basically undiscovered in this database because it was all legally disclosed, but no one knew where to look for it. And it was in that big hoard that we saw earlier. And it took a tip to ultimately surface it. But we believe that by teaming with Stanford and data scientists and people who are really smart at math and accounting to try to push the envelope on this bulk data once we get there, we might be able to algorithmically detect this stuff and get ahead of the curve and start finding more and more examples of this type of corruption that we believe to be hidden in this database. We're already off to a running start. Our open source code is up up on GitHub, and we have a lot of stuff already out there and working that you can try. That's been developed through a series of code sprints we've held, sponsored by Mozilla and others. Thanks to this grant, we're going to be able to hire a full-time developer to come on through Election Day and just push this thing really forward and carry the torch. And maybe it's one of you or someone that you know who will be that person. And if you think it is, please come talk to us and our team. We also know here, we're all in the house here in the front row, the whole coalition. And we have a lot of campaign finance expertise here too. If you have ideas about stuff we should be doing, how we can move the ball down the field, we want to hear them. And if you just want to learn more about the project or get involved with the nerdy stuff, just check out CaliforniaCivicData.org. Thank you.